Okay, well, this one is not really an idiom, but it's becoming more or less like vocabulary. It's the word guesstimate. So that is a combination of the word guess and estimate. But when you say estimate, people know that you don't know the exact answer, but you're using well, what they say is like a calculated guess. It's an estimate based on your knowledge. But if you say guesstimate, you're basically kind of admitting that that it's either difficult to estimate, because of the circumstances, or uh, because you you really sort of don't know. Well, you're basically saying it's difficult to estimate it, right? But I've got an ophthalmologist out there, and you have to be careful if you're using this, because you wouldn't want to say that to your patient, right? Yeah, well, I was in there and I was doing some surgery, and I just kind of guesstimated it, right? Because you're saying that you're guessing, right? Uh, so, and in certain situations, if you were giving a presentation, like there's a kind of I forgot exactly what he said, like a veterinary statistician out there, and you know, if he was giving a presentation, he could say, "We estimated it," uh, but if you're saying you guesstimated it, you're basically saying you kind of don't know what you're doing, right? So be careful when you say it, right? Uh, you could, if you were giving a presentation to a bunch of people who understand the situation, you know, um, you could say we guesstimated, and they understand. You can't really come up with something close. Oftentimes, it's an estimate is based on some math that you actually, or some previous knowledge, or some mathematics, that you can make an estimate based on science or mathematics, right? It's a, if I make an estimate on how much concrete it's going to take to make this sidewalk. So if I'm making a sidewalk, and I take the measurements, and I know how deep that sidewalk is going to be, and I know how wide it is and how long it is, I can make an estimate, right? And I should be pretty close just doing the math. Okay, so that's an estimate. But if you really can't, you know, do a proper estimate, sometimes you have to guesstimate. Okay, let me just give you a couple examples of how this is used. Well, all I'm saying is that if you say guesstimate, you're could be reducing your credibility, but in many cases, people kind of understand. If you're an employer, you don't want to tell your employees, "Yeah, I guesstimated your salary," right? Or "I guesstimated your taxes." No. So here we go. This is a situation where he's doing like some landscaping, and you know how that goes. Everybody knows how that goes. You don't really know the situation. How are you going to measure all of that little, like, if you were going to measure this whole thing, and you'd have to measure here, measure here, measure here, measure here, and it's just too many shapes and curves and stuff, and too many different depths, right? So he
And that gives me my base number of the square footage leading into the garden building, this concrete apron, and then I try to guesstimate any of the land that's also leading into.
Okay, so he has to guesstimate it, because come on, you can't measure this stuff, you know.
And the police sketch ends up being mostly a guesstimate.
Yeah, I mean, come on, you're providing. You have no choice but to guesstimate when you're doing a police sketch of someone based on someone's description, and their memory, and it's just, how could you possibly, let's see if there's,
older than the biblical guesstimate.
okay, so in the Bible, like before they really had like carbon dating and stuff like that, they sort of just guesstimated things, you know. Oftentimes it's, there's no choice but to guesstimate things. Okay. Anyway, so there you go. I'm glad to be back, and don't forget to like the video, and I'll talk to you on the next idiom.